Well, hello. Welcome back to Curlis Mania. We have another special guest for another epic album battle. And so I'd like to introduce Todd Evans.
Hey,
Uh,
everybody.
how are you doing, Todd?
Good, very good. Thanks. It's good to be here.
Good. So glad to have you. Todd, you've probably seen him on the Contrarians. He's been on a bunch of different channels. He's on Rush Fans. He contributes to Rush Fans. He's also, I mean, Grant has been on this channel, so I can say he's been on Grant's Rock Warehouse as well. So you've probably seen him around. He knows his stuff. And he is I reached out to him and said, hey Todd, do you want to do an episode, an album battle, because that's what we've been doing a lot on this channel. And he said absolutely. So we decided on some primetime Genesis, in my opinion. I mean, so we're gonna do,
Yeah,
right, I mean, we're gonna do Trick of the Tail against Wind and Wuthering.
yeah, probably my favorite Genesis era if I was asked to pick. Although later in as I go on in life, I tend to be more I've tended to be more into the trio period, which is later, which
Hmm.
is so I'm kind of but I feel like these two albums are recorded basically not recorded the same year, but released the same year, and kind of a peak and a very transitional between two eras of the band.
Huge. I mean, a huge transitional time, and agreed. It's funny. I was listening to the albums today and realized that they were both released in 1976. One was early 76 and one was late 76. So wow, two great albums in one year. Fantastic. So I didn't realize that. I was thinking Wind and Wuthering was 77, and it's not. It's like December 76.
December 17th.
Yes, exactly. So, but I always listen to, I mean, I'm a massive Genesis head, so I go on YouTube and I look for bootlegs for from 19 the 77 tour, which is the Wind and Wuthering
Yeah.
tour, and it's just fantastic. They were such a good live band.
Yeah, I used to have a bunch of those, and I used to. I had there's one called A Living Story from that era, and there was back in the day, my day when I was younger, which was the early '80s. There was a lot of stuff available, and there were lots of FM concerts, and I used to record all the FM concerts, and I used to have just a massive collection of those, and I kept them until I got I was just about to turn 40, and I was like, I probably don't need to keep these anymore. I don't need to have, 18 different versions of Afterglow.
Right, right. That's
The ones that
definitely a
are on the
stage,
records are probably and they'll suffice.
definitely a live staple for them. Afterglow.
Yeah.
It's on like every show, and yeah, I agree with you. And I had one of the I used to go to New York shopping for vinyl, and that was like our thing back in the again in the 80s as well. In high school, I lived in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, and we would go to New York just for fun, and we'd go to all these record stores in the Greenwich Village. They had one after another, and we would go. Genesis was one of my bands, so we would always look for Genesis bootlegs. And I remember one of them was called From the Mouth of the Monster, and it's
Yes,
1978.
I remember that.
Yep.
I had one that was called Revelatory Genesis that was pretty popular. That was from the uh it's part 1980 and part 1979, I think. And then I had this one, oh, what was it called? It had the Abacab logo on it, and it was called Genesis Live, and then it was like a lyric from Supper's Ready, and it was so bad. It had Supper's Ready on it, which was cool, like a later, like 81 version of Supper's Ready,
Wow,
but it
81.
was like
Supper's
you were
ready.
standing
Wow.
in the beer line. I mean, it was that's what it sounded like. I was like, oh, that was not a wise thing to pay $50 for this. But
Yeah, that happens. That happened to all of us at some point, where you're like, "Oh,
yeah,
this looks so great," and then you put it on, and you're like, you could barely hear the band. It's like, oh, it's
right.
horrible. It's like, where was this recorded? In the back corner of the arena. Oh my
Yeah,
God, horrible. And like you said, they were never cheap. You'd have to pay like
right.
50, $60 for it, and it was like, oh, ouch. But anyway, we're digressing already. So we're here to talk about these two records. Um, excellent, excellent. And like as you said, a very transitional time for the band. This is the two albums where they had a four piece with Steve Hackett. And right after the departure of Peter Gabriel. So it's a really important time for the band. And you can we're going to jump into both of these records, but I'll just give a quick overview where, you know, you can one was recorded in at Trident Studios in London, Trick of the Tail, and then the next record was recorded in Holland, I believe. They decamped to Holland to record the album. Um, and they toured. The Trick of the Tail was very successful. They toured Trick of the Tail with Bill Bruford on drums, because Phil was said, you know, I don't want to always be looking over my shoulder. If I'm going to front the band and sing, I want to make sure I know the drummer is just excellent.
Somebody I trust.
Yeah, exactly. Which Bill Bruford, come on, I mean, that's definitely going to trust him. Well, although I heard he had a big attitude when he toured with Genesis, apparently
Yeah.
he was kind of like, Genesis, you guys are, you know, they because Genesis was sort of like the last band to come out of the, or apparently one of the later bands, progressive bands, to kind of make it big. But behind Yes and ELP um and King Crimson and all those bands. Um, but in any case, we're gonna jump into this now. We're not gonna That's enough history. Let's jump into this because we're gonna talk about these enough. So I'm gonna hand it over to Todd to we'll start with Trick of the Tail. Um so go ahead, Todd, and jump into Trick of the Tail. What's your overall assessment?
Well, I think that Trigger it's funny. When I first heard these records when I was probably ninth grade, something like that. Uh Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering had been out and for not very long. And I always thought of Trick of the Tail as one of those essential rock albums because I think of it as being like Zeppelin 2, in that kind of echelon, because I thought of it as something that, something you had to have, something you had to, listen to on a good stereo system. And I think Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering are both really fantastic recordings. And so I kind of think of them as being probably more important than they are. Because we were really into to this stuff when me and my friends. And you know, I feel like the way that this album hits you with "Dancing on a Volcano," I think is really unique and it's really powerful. And I can't say enough about David Henschel. I think he's just outstanding as a producer, and I just really love the sound of the band that he gets on this. And I think that you've got some what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say soundscapes. You've got this thing that Hackett is doing that is just really important and because it's not typical what you hear usually a guitarist do. It's like, kind of these kind of arpeggiated at the beginning of Dancing on a Volcano. It's like this repeating pattern that's kind of sets an atmosphere.
The ding
And
ding 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 ding
yeah,
ding. Yeah.
yeah, it's not the least bit show offy. It's just it's like part of the soundscape. And so I just think that it's kind of on a different level than a lot of the stuff that was coming out at the same time. As I really feel like they're really playing as an ensemble here. Uh, you've got Entangled, which is incredibly atmospheric. I can remember, you know, after hearing this album for probably a decade, I can remember being in college and being at a friend's house and him playing this record and having it was dark. We were listening to Trick of the Tail in the dark, and Entangled was just I had like an out of body experience. I was like, I knew that this was really uh, ethereal sounding and just had this great atmosphere, but I never listened to it in that way. and I kind of had, kind of a rediscovery of that. I always liked Squonk. I think Squonk is like a perfect example of just really great engineering. I mean, it just sounds great. Those bass pedals and it's just I just love the way it sounds. And I want to say
That
this
room
too
drum
about
sound,
what's that?
room drum sound they get on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I wanted to say, it's really there's a lot being said lately about Steve Hackett. And I kind of I want to say something about Steve Hackett. I just mentioned how I think he's really important to these two albums, and Wind and Wuthering as well, to making them have the kind of sound that they do. But there is a lot of I almost think of it as revisionist history. There's a lot of people who are saying that Steve Hackett is like the centerpiece of these two albums, and he's the most important thing about these two albums. I think these two albums, the person who really shines is Tony Banks, and I just kind of want to say that up front because I really feel like and on we'll get to this more when we get into Wind and Wuthering. I think Tony is the one who really started to deliver like on another level when you get to when you get to these two albums. So love Steve Hackett. Think he's a great guy. Think he's a great guitarist. I'm glad he's doing what he's doing now. But there are a lot of people who say the end of Genesis was when Steve Hackett left. And I don't believe that.
I'm
So I
not
kind
sure
of
I'm on
wanted to
board with
say
that
that up
either,
front.
Todd.
What's that?
I said I don't think I'm on board with that either.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to say that up front because there's a lot of assumptions when you talk about these two albums that where a lot of people think that this is where it was really good and it's all downhill from here. I don't necessarily think that. I hope this isn't me going too much on a tangent, but when I hear and then there were three, the thing that amazes me about him, and then there were three, is such how Rutherford is doing such a good Hackett impression.
Mhm.
I mean, I really feel like he's playing really close to what Steve would have played. So I think that he's a really important part of both of these albums. I think this is where he starts to shine as far as not just playing leads, but really becoming part of the arrangements. And but I don't want that to make it sound like I'm saying he's the most important member during these two albums because I really think that's Tony. People who have been on shows with me about Genesis know that I'm all about Tony. But do you want me to go through the rest of the songs, or do you
Yeah,
want to
go.
bounce back and forth on the songs?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead and finish up. And then I'll jump in on it.
Okay. Well, I
Uh,
wanted to say also about Squonk because I remember Squonk being kind of important. It might have just been where I was, in Atlanta, but I remember the AOR rock station playing Squonk a lot. I mean, I can remember getting this record when I was in high school and thinking that Squonk was like a hit because I remembered hearing it on the radio. And I don't know what your experience was up where you lived, but
yes, no, I remember hearing it on the radio as well. WNEW used to play it. And WPLJ in New York, they used to play
yeah,
Squonk. Yeah.
WKLS down here, 96 Rock.
Yep.
And so yeah, I think Madman Moon doesn't get as much attention as it should. I think the little percussion break in the middle with the castanets and the I'm the Sandman Boy, I have news for you, that part. I think that that's really great. I think that that is one of the things that shows the how much versatility they had as a band. Um, it was in a conversation. I don't remember where I was. I don't remember whether it was on Facebook or in YouTube comments where there were people talking about somebody said something like Trick of the Tail would be great if it wasn't for robbery, assault, and battery. And I thought to myself, what? There are people that don't like robbery, assault, and battery?
Mm.
because that is my absolute favorite moment of this album. And I think that that little mellotron and keyboard break with the in the middle of that song is really brilliant. I was just reading recently that they tried to do the what they were trying to do with this song was they were trying to show that they could still have humor after Peter was gone, and that they could still do something that is almost kind of silly and theatrical. And I think they pulled that off. Uh, Ripples, it's been said that they wrote that with Phil in mind, like that they thought that that would be good, something good for him to sing.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
any even
I didn't know that.
yeah,
That's
even if
interesting.
he
Yeah.
wasn't, let me. Yeah, I read that recently that even if he wasn't going to be the singer, that they thought that that would be one that he could sing, kind of like More Fool Me, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. The softer stuff. They knew he could sing the softer stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I like that a lot. If I had to pick the weakest song on the album, I probably would say Trick of the Tail, but I feel like it is important for the album because it's lighter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I feel like it needs to be where it's at. And one of the things I love about Trick of the Tail is that I think it's just the perfect length. Um, 8 songs is great for this. By the time you get to Los Endos, it doesn't feel like it's been that long since you've heard those themes from
Mhm.
Dance on a Volcano. And so when you get to it, it's like, ah, great. I wanted to hear that again anyway. And then and there it is. And so
Is it
I
that
think
epic feeling, that epic when it
yes.
repeats, you know?
Yes, and it's so great. And we were talking about collecting live recordings. There were so many live recordings where I played Los Endos, and it
Yeah.
was always perfect. I mean,
Just
I don't think I've ever heard a version
chef's
of it that
kiss.
I didn't like. I mean,
Yeah.
even when they played it late, like in '90s, it was always perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's always a
so
great live song, just
yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. And so, I'm gonna say more about what I the reason the thing that I like most about Trick of the Tail when after we talk about the next album, because
Okay.
it'll
Perfect.
kind of it'll kind of explain why I picked what I picked. But it's I there is something about Trick of the Tail. It's really I'm gonna save one word for later, but I will say it's a very classy album. I
Hmm.
think that
Oh
it's
God,
very
yeah.
well put together. It's almost reserved in its like in a good way in its sequencing. It
Yeah.
is just long enough. It's just the right number of songs,
Yep.
and
Absolutely.
so that's
Yeah.
kind of my take on it.
All right. Well, I'll jump in on it. I'm probably gonna repeat a lot of stuff that you're saying because you did a great analysis of it. And agreed with a lot of your comments. So um I'm just going to quickly go through it. So Dance on a Volcano, what a start. I mean, as you said, it's just intense. It's very intense. You can feel the intensity. It's almost like, okay, Peter's gone. Watch this. Like you guys are all writing us off. There were many articles saying that Genesis was dead. It's like Mick Jagger leaving the Stones. Like they're done. There's no
Yeah,
way. There's no way. And they're like, oh yeah, watch this. And that's Dance on a Volcano. That's what it feels like. The weird tide signatures, the amazing rhythm section is on fire. Great vocal from Phil. I mean, guy jumps in on vocals. I mean, the first song you hear, it's like, what? This is Phil on vocals?
yeah, and
You know?
everybody thought that we which we've already talked about that he was just the guy that sang a soft song occasionally, and
Yeah.
then you hear Dance on the Volcano, and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah, no, it's like everyone sat up like, whoa, okay. And I guess, the story, probably they had like 400 people reply to an ad, and they narrowed it down to 30 people. And they actually had one guy that came into the studio to sing Squonk, and he just couldn't. It was out of his range. He couldn't do it. And I guess Phil was on the side kind of going, I think I could do this. I think I could do this. But he didn't want to like push. He didn't want to push too hard. He was just waiting for someone to ask him to do it. And then
yeah,
finally, I guess after this guy sang Squonk, they kind of turned to him and they said, what do you think? And he said, I think it's average. Give me a shot. I want to sing this. And so that was
right.
finally, he had had enough. He's like, I want to try to sing this. And they did. And it worked out great. So anyway, so that's Dance on a Volcano. What a start. Entangled, as you said, absolutely beautiful. Guitars sound amazing. A rare Hackett Banks composition. Um,
Yeah.
I think that you said that you were getting into a zone listening to this song. You know, that it's that long keyboard solo at the end that just keeps building and building and
And it's so
building.
spooky.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's perfect for what Hackett's playing. So
Oh,
yeah.
it's just fantastic. It's just this, like you said, it really gets in this hypnotic zone, and it just keeps like that. You said that the guitar figure just keeps repeating, and Banks just keeps going and going and going, and it's just unbelievable. Squonk, inspired by Kashmir, that's what I read. They wanted to get that Led Zeppelin. They
Yeah.
wanted to get that sound. They didn't quite get it, but I hear what they're going for. Um, and very cool and different for Genesis by this point. This is kind of a different thing for them. Um, I had read somewhere that there might be it might be possibly about Peter Gabriel a little bit. Some of the lyrics.
Yeah, I heard that too.
If you listen to it, like it talks about pool of tears and you never thought you had the things you thought you should have had, but you'll not get them now. I mean, if you read it and think about it, you go, oh, maybe they are talking because they were upset when he left. They weren't exactly
Yeah.
excited that he left the band. So, um, but great song, Madman Moon, very Tony Banks. And I have to agree with your comments on Banks. I mean, I think he was the one who really thought, okay, I'm going to keep this band alive. Like we're not going to die. We've put too much time and energy into this, and I'm going to make sure that we survive. And he worked really hard on writing songs.
Yeah,
That's my
and there's a
opinion.
lot that's been yeah, there's a sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
No,
but
go
there's a
ahead.
lot
Go
that's
ahead.
been said about Banks being really heavy-handed, and he admits that. He
Hmm.
admits that he pushed really hard for his ideas to get used. I have something I want to grab. Hang on just a
Go for
sec.
it. Yeah.
I uh I don't know how if you've actually seen this set right here that they
Yeah,
put
I've
out
seen
for the
it.
last tour,
Yep.
but there is a really great here it is. There's a really great image right here, and it's Phil, and it says, "It's a democracy as long as we agree with Tony." And I always just thought that was great.
And they say stuff like that all the time. So I mean, it's obviously that
Yeah.
Tony was sort of the guy. I don't know if you want to call him like the CEO of the band. I mean, he was the guy that everyone had to like deal with whenever you
Well,
were.
and
You know?
if you look at the anything that's been written about like the making of Wind and Wuthering, because there's so much controversy about, a bunch of Tony stuff getting in, a bunch of Hackett stuff not getting in.
Mhm.
They
Right.
actually say, we all voted. We
Hmm.
all picked Tony's songs.
Right. Right.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, they actually did like weigh in. It wasn't like he said, "We're doing this," or I'm out of here.
I mean, Tony's an incredible writer. He's an incredible writer, and he's a great. I mean, he's also amazing keyboard player. I mean, so he's got a lot of talent, and his writing is incredible. I mean, when and there is. I mean, he said in one interview something about you either have me to blame or to love for it's one of those, and
Right.
it's so true, and you're expressing love for him, which is great. I mean, I agree. I mean, Tony Banks is amazing. And I have heard a lot of the talk about keeping Hackett down, like you're keeping him down, and Tony Banks was always keeping Hackett down. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think that some of that, like you said, over time has gotten kind of exaggerated.
Well, I
Um,
have a controversial, contrarian, if you will, view on Steve Hackett's solo material. I think it lacks discipline. And
mhm,
I think that he could have used somebody to rein him in. And I think what you're hearing on these two albums is his contributions being focused. And
mhm.
so, I then
Yes.
that's what they argued about during the sessions of Wind and Wuthering is that Hackett said it doesn't stretch out enough, it's not adventurous enough. And the
Mhm,
other guys were saying it needs to be more concise. It needs to be, we need to be working towards something that is more, I guess concise is really the best word. Uh, and so, when you look at it that way, it's like you can't really choose sides. There's nobody to blame, really. It's two different approaches. And I don't
yeah.
think either one of them was wrong.
I agree. And I think
But
that
if you look at something like Voyage of the Acolyte, I mean, I like that album, but I don't like it as much as I like these.
right, right,
So
right. It's a good, that's well said. That's a great point. And it's, you're right. And Hackett really was the guy who was really pushing to get crazier all the time. He always wanted to
yeah,
push the boundaries. And I
which
think
is cool. I don't wouldn't take that from him. I
absolutely no, it's
don't have
great.
an issue
It's
with that.
great that he was that guy doing that,
Yeah,
because some of the moments on these records, you're like, oh, like you can tell that maybe he pushed for that, you know?
yeah,
So anyway, and Tony later, a side note again, doing a lot of side notes, but it's all great. Is that Tony actually said during then number three kind of missed Steve a little bit because Steve was always the one pushing for the crazier ideas,
mhm,
whereas Mike and Phil were more conservative. So
yeah,
suddenly within there were three, there was nobody pushing for the crazy ideas anymore. So
yeah,
anyhow, we're getting off track. So Madman Moon, I love. Great way to end side one. Love it. Very, very Tony Banks. Very melodic. Love it. Robbery, Assault, and Battery, side two. Like you said, whimsical comedic track. Sort of, I have in my notes, I have sort of like Harold the Barrel trying to
yeah.
do a fun track on the album, and I think it succeeds for the most part. Phil's doing his sort of West London accent, they caught me in the bank stealing the money kind of thing, and because he was an actor, right? So he's kind of maybe drawing on that. Ripples, beautiful, another beautiful track. Um, Great with a great chorus. The middle section goes on for quite a bit, but it's pretty awesome. A very good ballad, a great ballad. Trick of the Tail, it's funny. I love this track. There's something about it. I have very Genesis underlined. I mean, who else would do? It's sort of poppy. It kind of has a Beatlesy kind of um Beatlesy feel to it almost with that bouncy piano, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of later on, That's All.
Yeah, it does.
You
Yeah,
know?
quite a bit. And it's funny, whenever I think of Trick of the Tail, I automatically think of the Monkees. And it
Oh, there you
doesn't
go.
really sound like the Monkees, but they look like the Monkees in the video. So,
They do. They do.
tiny Genesis sitting on the piano or whatever they're doing.
Kind
And
of a
so it
it's
always makes me think of the
it's
Monkees.
a very zany video, yeah. And Steve has
Yeah.
like the creature hand, and yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, ends on Los Endos. I have excellent, awesome. What a way to end the record. Phil again. Phil is on fire on this whole album. I mean, he's just playing his out of his mind. The drumming. I mean, I'm a drummer, and you listen to this album, you're like, the drumming is just fantastic throughout the whole thing. And I have the power jazzy instrumental, Weather Report, Zappa, Mahavishnu Orchestra type stuff, which Phil loved, right?
Yeah.
And I guess Phil came to the band and said, he didn't really write it per se, but he came in and was like, "Hey, I got this riff in my head, like there now," like he kind of said it, like sang it, uh,
Yeah.
and so they so anyway, so they bring back all the themes. Actually, as you said, they bring back the themes from Squonk, and it comes full circle, which is really cool. It makes it feel very epic at the end. So and Los Endos, as we said, the last note I have on here is live staple for a reason. It's an amazing
Yeah.
track, and they can kill it live, and they always do, and the crowd always goes nuts every time they do it. So it's just and I have another thing I have, and through this is like you mentioned this as well. Throughout the whole record, great ensemble playing. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. They're playing as a band. They are just like gelled together, and they are playing fantastic the whole record. So
Yeah.
that's my take on Trick of the Tail. It's
I always think of something that Phil said in an interview. He must have said this in the 80s, but it always stuck with me. He said Genesis didn't sound good until half midway through the last track on side one of Foxtrot. And I don't know why he put it that way, but
Mhm.
if you think about that, it's when the bass pedals kick in Can Utility and the Coastliners. That's the moment when you can go, there's where it starts. You know what
Yep.
I mean? And
Yeah.
so that's where this sound starts.
It's
And it
that.
goes through Lamb, and the Lamb sounds like it does, and it's great, but it's almost there. And then you hear Squonk and Los Endos, and you're like, oh, okay.
Oh, here we
This is
go.
Yeah.
Drop in. This is really we're just going to another place here.
Yeah.
And you're right. I'm thinking about Can Utility, that dan gan dan dan
Yeah.
gan gan dan gan dan, and it's just like
And
jam
when he said
on.
that, I was like, "Oh, I know what he means. I know the part he means." And
Yeah,
that sounds great. And
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
where from that moment on, everything they did sounded really good.
They start really gelling as a band. It's just you can
Mhm.
feel it. You can feel it. So yeah, so let's move on to the next record from 1976, Wind and Wuthering.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Go for it.
I uh I think that there is no more underrated prog song than 11th Earl Mar. I think 11th Earl
Totally
Mar
agree. Totally
is
agree.
is the greatest. I don't I actually don't think it's the greatest Genesis song because there's another song we're going to get to very, very soon, which I think is tied for that. But it that is the ultimate Mellotron song.
So good.
And
So good.
it is so intense and it's recorded beautifully.
Mhm.
And the way the Mellotron just swells, which is something that they'll continue to do uh, later on. They do it in Undertow in on the album after this, where there's just like
Yeah.
you think you're getting all the keyboards you're gonna get. You think the wall of sound is as thick as it's gonna get, and then it gets thicker.
Yes. Yes.
And
Right.
uh and so I just think 11th Earl of Mara, first of all, it's got incredible energy. It's off
Yes.
the charts for energy, and that the orchestration of it is just absolute genius. So people don't talk about 11th Earl Lamar enough. They don't raise it in stature as they should. And so yeah,
Completely
11th Earl
agree.
Lamar
Yeah.
just absolutely blows me away. And it never doesn't. Every time
Right.
I hear it, I'm a little bit, I'm still surprised at how much I like it.
Mhm.
But I think that probably there are two songs that I consider to be my favorite Genesis songs. I know this isn't about me, but I'm going to say this anyway. One for the Vine and Cul-de-sac from Duke are my two favorite Genesis songs. And One for the
Right.
Vine is there is nothing like One for the Vine anywhere by any band. There is nothing like it.
So
That
unique. So unique.
yeah, that kind of like little that weird kind of percussion break. I never know what to call it, but everybody always knows what you mean
Yeah.
when you say
Yeah.
it. That
Yep.
little breakdown. I've heard bands copy that. Like my favorite band is IQ, and they have a song where they copy that, and it's so cool. It's like, oh, it's like One for the Vine. But
Yeah.
there isn't anything like that, Hackett is right there in that creating that. He's part of that whole quirky weirdness of that little transition. But the thing that's so great about One for the Vine is the last minute of One for the Vine is just you just going, what what is he doing? What I always thought, that build up towards, it's the piano, it's the quiet piano part at the end, but there's that build up. It's like for a minute. And it sounds like it's modulating, like it's changing keys. And you think,
Yes.
okay, well, wow, well, got all those key changes.
Where are we
There
going?
is a
Yeah.
I know that you probably know what this is, but have you ever seen Doug Helverling's channel, YouTube channel, The Daily Doug, where the guy sits at the piano and he listens to a track and he's got the sheet music up?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yep.
So he does One for the Vine. And I think watching his analysis of One for the Vine is like a key part of really appreciating the track because he actually analyzes it and says, actually what he's doing. And
Mm.
it's basically just he's adding notes to the chords that make him so they're kind of key changes, but they're kind of him just adding things over the top of chords to make
Mhm.
them sound like they're modulating.
Oh,
And it's
interesting. Interesting.
yeah, so it's like I'm not saying that those aren't key changes because technically they are, but if you look
Mhm.
at this at the I don't know what it's in like some crazy key like C sharp or something like that. And
Of
the
course it is.
the
Yeah.
register, the staff has like seven like sharps on it, at the beginning.
Mhm.
And so it stays technically in that key before it resolves into I don't remember what key it resolves into G or something like that. But
Mhm.
it stays in that key. But what he's doing with the chords is just really, really creative. I mean, super creative. And I'm not a keyboardist. I'm not a piano player. I took uh, uh, music theory in college, but I can't really say with any authority what it is exactly that Tony's doing in there. But I think it's super creative. And One for the Vine is always a standout track for me. I've probably gone on too long about
No,
it, so
that's
to
absolutely. I couldn't agree
I'll
more.
move on to Your Own Special Way. And the reason that Your Own Special Way is so cool is you're seeing the beginning of Mike Rutherford, the pop songwriter, which is really what he becomes. Quite a good one. So, when you think about Mike and the Mechanics and, the things that when you listen to some of the later Genesis albums, you can kind of pick out and go, that sounds like a Mike song.
Yeah.
This is really the first Mike song that kind of fits that mold. And
Hmm.
so I've
Absolutely.
always appreciated it, and I know people have mixed feelings about it, but I've always appreciated it. I for what it is, in that I think it's after 11th Earl of Mar and One for the Vine. I think it's perfectly placed and it's welcome.
Hmm.
And
Sort of needed.
I
Yeah.
yeah yeah I said this on another show recently, and I went and I saw Genesis in 2021. and well, I can't recommend anybody to go do it because it's the time has passed. But I hear
However,
people
yeah.
say things like, I don't want to see them like that. I don't want to remember, Phil sitting in a chair and all that stuff. But all I can say to that is that was a really emotional experience for me, and it really felt like it was them saying goodbye.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I love so much about that show is my wife and I were sitting next to this family, and they were like probably lower middle class family, and they were like from age 14 to 75. Like grandma was there, and the two parents and the kids, and then some younglings. And I remember thinking, oh, I hope these guys aren't. I've seen the set list. I hope these guys aren't bored. They knew every song. They knew the words to every song. They sang along to every song. They knew I know what I like in your wardrobe. And it was just from the kids to grandma. And
Amazing.
songs like Your Own Special Way are the reason why that is the case, because they got hooked by songs that were easy to like, and
Mhm.
then they caught the Genesis bug. And whenever I see anybody bad mouthing Your Own Special Way, I think, you know what, songs like that are really important. And I think if I think it was good that they did that kind of thing. So
Yeah. Is it
I,
is
I
it possible is it possible that that was the first straight up love song they did ever?
I'm trying to think.
Is
I
that
think it might
possible?
be.
Yeah.
It's possible because Ripples sort of counts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ripples is pretty long, so
Right. Right. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
got that instrumental part in the middle that's pretty lengthy,
Mhm.
and kind of requires some patience to sit through. Not that it's not interesting, but
Yeah, it
for
does.
somebody who listens to mainstream rock music, it would
Yeah.
it's a bigger ask than
Sure.
Your Own Special Way. But I
Yeah.
I think it's important for what it is, and I think it is one of the things that kind of puts this kind of elevates this record a little bit. What Gorilla is great. I always think of What Gorilla is as a successful whodunit. It's
Mhm.
like just kind of a silly kind of a instrumental song that is just has a lot of energy, but
Mhm.
for some reason I think that it really works.
It does.
It's
Yeah.
it's the perfect link. It's in the perfect spot on
Mhm.
the album. And I think What Gorilla is great. All in a Mouse's Night, I have gone like this, up and down throughout my Genesis fandom about how I felt about All in the Mouse's Night. Started out liking it, spent a bunch of years not liking it, saying that, the lyrics are too dumb. It's in that, first song on side two position, and I don't think it's good enough to be there. I've said a whole bunch of things about it, but I've come back around on it, and I actually think it's pretty great. I don't think that um I don't I don't find it cringy or embarrassing or anything like that. And musically it's actually pretty good. And it's got some great Steve Hackett stuff in it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've come around on All in a Mouse's Night. Blood on the Rooftops, to me, Blood on the Rooftops is beautiful. And I love that it's there because it showcases Hackett's nylon string classical guitar playing, which is something that not a lot of bands showcase. It's something that is, a skill of his, a thing that he does that's all him. And so I love that about it, and I love that it's on the album, and I think it's in a good spot on the album, but it feels like a Steve Hackett song to me. It feels like, okay, this is the Steve Hackett showcase on the album. Whereas on the album before that, it felt like the whole thing was a Genesis showcase. But for
Hmm.
me, for some reason, I always kind of feel like Blood on the Rooftops. Okay, this is the Steve song.
Hmm.
And that's
Right.
not to be positive or negative. That's just what it feels like to me. So I
Mhm.
love it. If I had to pick a least favorite song on the album, it's probably that or All in a Mouse's Night. I'm not quite sure. But we can discuss that.
It
But
has that classical guitar intro, very Hackett, very Hackett.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I love that for it. I'm glad it's on there, and I think it's a
Right.
great track.
Mhm.
Um, Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers and In That Quiet Earth. First of all, I think that the melodies that Tony is playing during that first part is really beautiful. And I think that the In That Quiet Earth part is really pretty heavy for them. I mean, it and they started putting that uh the in the cage medley, they used to call it.
Mhm.
And they dropped that into it, I think, in '83. I think the Mama Tour was the first time they did that, because prior to that, it would go from Cinema Show into Slippermen and then into Afterglow.
Mhm.
And so they kind of wedged it in there after Slippermen in that medley, and that's where it stayed. I don't think they ever pulled it out. And
It
so
got stuck in the medley forever after that. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I think that they really like it, and it's a really welcome part of the show because it does. I mean, it's no heavy metal song or anything like that, but I like the heaviness of it, and I think that after All in a Mouse's Night and Blood on the Rooftops and Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers, that it's really refreshing and kind of welcome.
Hmm.
And so I love it. I love the intro to I love the transition into Afterglow. And what can you say about Afterglow? It's one of my favorite songs of all time. It's been an important part of the show from then on. They still do, whatever the lights look like, they still do whatever the most current version is of the lights coming up like this during that song. And it's always been a staple of the live show. And
Never get
it
tired of
was
it though. I never,
no,
never.
never get tired of it,
Yep.
and it's always emotional for me, and man, especially at that last show.
Oh,
And there's a lot that's been said about Afterglow. It's very simple. There's a lot, Tony has admitted that he went home and said, "Oh my God, I just rewrote Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." And that's really funny when you think about it, because you could
it's
totally
kind of
see how
close. It
he
is
would
kind of
do
close.
that. Yeah, but I love that they decided to just do it anyway. They all liked it too much to
Mhm.
to kill it, and I'm glad they did. And I didn't even think about that until I heard Tony say it in, I think it's the interview for the 2007 remasters. I think was the first time I ever heard Tony say that, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I never noticed that. But But
At least,
yeah,
yeah.
I let's I, let's hear what you have to say about it, and then I
Okay.
will.
Okay, I'll give you
I'm really ready to pick my album, but
I'll give you a break. I'll do my bit now real
all
quick.
right, good.
Um,
I'm really looking forward to this.
okay, so man, Wind and Wuthering, got to show it again.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
what
have
a
a big poster of it on this wall right here that you can't see
Oh,
because
you
it's
do.
over here.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool. I love it. Um, so yeah, I mean, woof. I mean, if you're a Genesis fan, Trick of the Tail, as we talked about, has this urgency to it. And this one feels like more like they took a breath, like, okay, we're surviving. Trick of the Tail did
Yeah.
well. We survived without Peter. We are still a functioning band. We're still going full guns. So I think Wind and Wuthering was them kind of going, okay, we're good, and we're gonna make another album now. And it doesn't feel as urgent. However, man, if you're a fan and you like, I mean, yes, is it a dense record? Yes. But if you're prepared to sit down like I am, and you are prepared to give yourself to this record and really give your full attention to it, it rewards so like repeated listening. I mean, I still listen to this album to this day and get chills, and I just love it. I love it to death. And I think it doesn't get the attention it deserves, because it's right after Trick of the Tail. Um, Now here's my thought. I'm just going to say this real quick. Well, I'm going to say that the Hackett situation did change with this album, because going into Trick of the Tail, he didn't have much because he had just done Voyage of the Alkalite. So he didn't really have much he was just kind of adding licks and helping out with various things. And I mean, he's still very much present on that record, but he didn't have as much material. And this was the different part where he did come into this album with a lot of material. And I think this is where the Banks Hackett thing kind of started to go, like, because he wanted more songs on the record. And rightly they said, well, Steve, if we love the song, yeah, it's going on the record. It's all it has to do with, everyone has to love the song to. So anyway, I'm sidetracking, but that's that kind of going into this record. That was sort of the vibe in the band. So 11th Earl of Mar, I can't say enough about. I couldn't. I mean, I'm just gonna epic Genesis track, very dense as always, but very melodic. I love the acoustic breakdown in the middle, um,
Yeah.
with the harmonies and this, like you said, the swells. Oh, it's just like Genesis heaven. It's just that song is, apparently it's about a Scottish uprising, in the 1500s or something like that. And but it's a Genesis track that just, if you're a fan, you just love it to death, and we both do, obviously. So what a great way to start again. An amazing start to the record. One for the Vine, another Banks epic, as we talked about. I have another comment. Dense, yes, but I love it. Um, the Phil vocal performance again is very strong. Um, I believe it has something to do with false leaders, or putting your faith in leaders who will who will bring you into war and you'll die for them, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's also a part of it is the point of view of the leader himself who always thought he wanted to be the leader and then he found out being the leader sucks.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of
because
like that.
it's something about climbing the mountain, and then he gets stuck on ice, and then he's thinking
Yeah.
about being the leader or something. Yeah, I was reading the lyrics again today, and I'm like, why? So yeah, it's interesting.
And I spent a lot of my life thinking that was just kind of fantasy, kind of empty fantasy stuff
Right, I did
until
too.
I
Yeah,
really heard some people explain it and I was like, "Oh, okay. It's not."
yeah, it's kind of philosophical, actually.
Yeah.
So your own special way, we talked about, it really is the first, like, as we talked about, it's kind of the first time where you go, wow, they're kind of heading more in a, this kind of seems like almost like a pop song. But it's a sophisticated pop song, as Genesis
Yeah.
always did. Apparently it's a 12 string tuned strangely. So that's what he said, that's why it didn't, they learned how to play it in standard tuning, but if you listen to the original recording, you can tell that there's like a an interesting tuning going on with the 12 string. It's very like, it's just, there's something where he would tune this 12 string to the same note, or to a, no, sorry, a harmony. He would do like the one string would be one, the root note, and the next string would be a harmony. So anyway, if you watch, there's a documentary called Come Rain or Shine. I don't know if you've ever seen
Oh
that,
yeah, that's excellent.
where they're talking, where they're, it's amazing because they show them coming together and they start rehearsing, and they're like, okay, let's do this whole song. I can't remember which song it was, and it's and Mike, they look at Mike because there's a 12 string opening. The I think it's Musical Box. And
Yeah.
it's like, he's like, I don't know, that's a weird tuning. I don't know what it is.
Right.
He's like, I don't know. So it's just funny to see that, because it's like, that's what happens. You do all these weird tunings, you can't remember what they are. But anyway, great. I'm getting off on a tangent again. Great song, very straight ahead love song, which is the first, maybe the first time Genesis ever did that. Um, All in the Mouse's Night. I will stick up for this song all day, every day. I hear a lot of people rip on this song, and I think it's fantastic. I love it. Um, Listen to the drums on this track. Again, I'm a drummer, so I mean that I just, and he's just doing
Yeah.
all this offbeat, and he's doing this, and it's like, oh my god, it's so good. Um, so, and then I love the keyboards, and I love the lyrics are lighthearted. It's, I mean, you get the point of view of the family. It's a, I guess it's a mouse running loose in a house at night. You hear the viewpoint of the family, you hear the viewpoint of the mouse, and then you hear a viewpoint of the cat. So you have like all,
Uh,
so you're hearing it from all these different viewpoints, and I love it. I think it's an amazing track.
yeah,
Uh,
I do too. I've heard somebody say, and this was a long time ago, and I think I actually agreed with it, and now I think it's nonsense. I've heard people say that they should have replaced All in a Mouse's Night with Inside and Out. And I'm like, the older I get, the more I'm like, no.
I don't agree. I don't agree. So I mean, I've heard that's, it's a good song, but I don't think it's as
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it would mess up the sequencing and yeah.
yeah, I just don't think it would. I think there was a reason they chose not to put it on the record. It just didn't
Yeah.
fit. It didn't fit.
Yeah.
Blood on the Rooftops, maybe possibly the most underrated Genesis song. I mean, because Hackett had a lot to do with this song, and I think what happened was he wrote this and then he left the band. So they're not going to do Blood on the Rooftops live. So they didn't do it
Yeah.
live. So it never really got the airing that it probably deserved. Um, but I guess Collins wrote the Phil wrote the chorus apparently. So I don't, so it's the great chorus. And a
Yeah.
great use of Mellotron, right? The
Hmm.
Mellotron swells.
Definitely. Yeah.
Oh man.
And Tony and both Tony and Mike have said that this was Hackett's best contribution to Genesis was this song.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
they
saw
liked
that
it a
on
lot.
the interviews for the bonus interviews on the CD. I think that might be what you're talking about when they're talking about Wind and Wuthering. They're like, man, he brings like the best song he's ever done to the band, and then he leaves. Like we
Right.
love that song, you know. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, it's a great track, and like you said, it's amazing that, I don't think Mike and Tony would throw that out there unless they really meant it. They don't
Yeah.
say like that unless they mean it.
Yeah.
Um, so both of them are like, wow, I forgot how good this song is. So then Unquiet Slumbers for the Sweepers and In That Quiet Earth. Okay, Incendiary is what I have. What an instrumental. Only Genesis can do this. Um, I saw Hackett solo in 19, I think it was 1990, and I think it was at the Bottom Line, maybe.
Wow.
It was a
Okay.
small place, and he had like a three-piece band with him or whatever, and he opened with this. It was like, yeah, like it was
Oh, that's great.
fantastic. So
Uh-huh.
cool. And the drummer was really good, obviously. You have to be good to play that. And and like you said, the first time I saw Genesis was in 1983 at Madison Square Garden for the Mama tour. And
Okay, so we have the same first tour.
yeah, there you go. Where did you see him?
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a great tour. I mean, what a great concert that. I mean, that was my first show, my first real concert, and I just loved it to death. And I do remember them playing this part of this song for that instrumental part. Like you said, they threw it in the oldies instrumental
Yeah.
after in the cage, and they did that ding, 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 you know, that
Yeah.
little heavy part, and it's so great. And chicka 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 bam, and then it stops, bam, 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 and just like that was just awesome.
And you know, it's a lot like it's a lot like in the cage. The more years they played it, the better it got.
Yeah,
Like it had more energy and it was more exciting, like the more they did it.
absolutely, absolutely. So after that amazing, incredible, in my opinion, instrumental, just unreal, and I think Hackett did have a lot to do with that track, which I give him credit for that. Um, but amazing, and then it fades into Afterglow, which is a beautiful mellow popish song from Banks, um, that became a stage staple, as we talked about. It came live staple, and I couldn't agree with you more. That every time you see that, every time you hear it, there's something about that outro when it just keeps going, and Phil goes back on the drums, and I think on Three Sides Live, it's such a good version of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you said, I this one is one that I said it got better as they played it more, because Phil just sang the crap out of it live, and
Yeah.
then he would go back with Chester and do the double drums at the end.
And it almost becomes him, Phil walking back to the kit is I get like emotional about that. It
Yes, it's
almost
like a
becomes
great
part of the
moment.
song.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you get emotional almost, like, "Oh my god, he's going
Yeah.
back to the drums, he's gonna fit." And then the lights hit, like you said, the lights are going,
Yeah.
and they have that sort of, I think on the studio version, it's vocals where they do the, "Ah, ah,"
Yeah.
and it's like stacked vocals. It's almost like 10cc, I'm not you're not in love kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
but then I think live he just did it on the keys, obviously, but like in,
Yeah.
you know, but it still works. It's just an amazing song. So I'll finish it off. That's enough. Going on and on. So, but just an amazing record. So
Yeah, and I wanted to say too, I forgot to say this about the two instrumentals leading up to Afterglow. They're not very long.
no,
They're just the right length.
they're
Any longer and
perfect.
it would have been, oh, this is a lot to get through, you know. And I
Right.
mean that's part of prog rock is
Hmm.
you're supposed to sit through the part that that builds tension and you're supposed to wait for the
Yeah.
big finish, you know. And so I mean that's so it wouldn't have been terrible if that instrumental part had been longer, but I think they did exactly the right thing by keeping that kind of compact.
Yeah. I think it's perfect. I think it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's perfect. Love it. So now we got to get to the moment of truth where we start actually. I mean, these are obviously we're gushing about both of these albums, and
Yeah.
this happened on Foreigner too. We did with Grant. I did the debut and Double Vision. And we're just
Oh, that's the one I watched that one. And that's tough. I would have been in the same position with that.
so we're both gushing about both of the albums. So it's like, okay, which one do you pick? It's like I don't know. It's like picking your kids. Like I don't. It's so hard. Um,
Yep.
so where would you, I mean, if you had to, I mean, like Grants was like, "You're making me pick." I said, "Yeah, you got to pick something. You got to go for it." So what would you, if you had to pick, where would you go with it? I mean, this is just
Well,
today, obviously. It's just today.
my evolution with these two albums, they have changed positions a couple of times. I had always picked one, and then for like probably in the last 5 or 6 years, I was leaning towards the other one, and I'll tell you why. But I came back to my original pick, and it's this one.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say that Trick of the Tail is more elegant. It's
Right.
perfectly sequenced. It's disciplined. It's unique. Doesn't sound like anything else that came before it. And this one, in a way, there are parts of it like All in a Mouse's Night and the What Gorilla that are almost they're kind of scrappy.
Mhm.
They kind of have like not rough edges, but it kind of has like a there's like a more adventurous, more less refined kind of feeling to parts of it,
Hmm.
but the material's just too strong.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the material's just too strong. The songs are just too good,
Hmm.
and it's tough. It's really tough because Trick of the Tail is really good.
It's very tough. It's very difficult. Um, so I'm having the same problem, same struggles, and I made the same pick.
Okay.
And again,
Yay.
it's just I would say if you're a hardcore Genesis fan like we are, I mean, obviously both of us love Genesis. If you're prepared to put in the time with this album, it just gives you rewards like nobody's business. It's very dense. Like you said, it's kind of scrappy in a way. It's but the ensemble playing and on this is just unbelievable. And I for some reason in recent years I've come more back to this more often. For some reason I listen to this more often. And I grew up with Trick of the Tail. I mean,
Yeah.
my sister owned this record when I was like 7 years old. I used to listen to this album. So this has some really sentimental value to me. And like you said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. This album's
No.
amazing. And like you said, I think you put it perfectly. It's kind of a it's more considered. It's recorded. I mean, the recording of this is fantastic. I would say maybe this might even be sonically a little bit better.
I would give it the edge
You know?
over. It's got more bottom end. I would give it the
Yes.
edge.
Yeah. There's
Both of
something
them sound great, but I think that one sounds a little better.
when I listened to both of them back to back. I think this one won for Sonic.
Yeah.
Just the way it sounded. The guitars on Ripples and Entangled and whoa, they just sound
Yeah.
fantastic. So, but I just have to go back to ultimately we're both agreeing that we're leaning towards this one. And I also say that
Yeah.
Trick of the Tail also gets a ton of press already. People love that album,
Well,
you
it's
know.
it's a kind yeah, it's kind of an uphill battle for Wind and Wuthering because Trick of the Tail has a gatefold sleeve, Wind and Wuthering does not.
Yep,
Trick of the Tail had a mobile fidelity pressing,
yep,
Wind and Wuthering has not.
yep,
So you know what I mean? It's kind of like
yes,
Trick of the Tail has these things that get these seeds that get planted in people's brains that make you think it's the classic album
right.
and that this is just the one that came after it.
Yes, exactly.
So
Exactly. So we're both being a little bit contrarian, but
yeah,
I also think it's like I said, and like Tony Banks said it, the hardcore Genesis fan's gonna love that album, Wind and Wuthering. And
yeah,
we do. So I mean, I love not everyone loves All the Mouse's Night like I do. Not everyone loves 11th or Lamar as much as we both do.
right,
So
right.
there you go.
And one of the things uh, I talk we both I think we both called it a transit the two transitional albums. One of the things that I think that doesn't get overlooked, but I think people sometimes don't have the right attitude about it. And that's that what they did to reinvent themselves to become this super popular band, this juggernaut that they became, is that they really invented something new.
Hmm.
I mean, when you think about albums like Duke and Abacab and Shapes and Invisible Touch, where you've got this thing where they've made these pop songs and they're all people who are really hardcore into prog rock think of them as, just they're lighter, they're pop songs, but they're really weird. They're all super weird because
Yeah.
I mean, Tony Banks writes pretty weird music and both Tony and Mike have kind of a quirky side to them. So if you think about things like That's All and Land of Confusion and stuff like that, they're pretty strange songs.
Right.
And
Right.
so what they did was they invented this weird mainstream rock, prog rock hybrid thing that is really kind of their own. And then they put those longer songs on there that at the time when I heard them, I thought to myself, well, this is sort of prog rock, like Domino and Home by the
Oh,
Sea.
by the
But
sea. Yeah.
but after years go by and you look back on those, you think that was super adventurous of them to even do.
Hmm.
So this is where you get them going, we're gonna try to to rein things in and make the arrangements more concise and more compact and then we'll see where it goes. And that's where it went. And they were obviously, you know, right about something because
Yeah, they
they took
survived.
off and they got really popular. And there's lots of great interviews with the guys. And there's an interview where Tony says we wrote pop songs the whole time. I mean,
Mhm.
he talks about counting out time, and he talks about the little piano, the cross-handed technique on No Reply at All is this basically the same thing he played on Lamb Lies Down in Broadway. And so
Yes.
they spent
Yep.
a lot of time in the 80s and 90s kind of defending
Defending
themselves.
himself. Yeah. Right.
But I think it really starts here. That's where they start going, okay, well, we're a prog rock band. There are lots of prog rock bands. We know what that's all about. We know what a long song is. We made, Supper's Ready, the most, one of the most quintessential prog rock songs there are. But I think that what they started building on these two albums was the rest of their career.
Absolutely. No, and I always say Genesis did a very slow transition where, where their
Yeah,
fans stayed with them. A lot of people talk about Then There Were Three was a big shift. I mean, but it was kind of subtle. There's still some
it is.
like you said, it's art pop. It's not just pop, it's already
Yeah.
pop.
The
Uh,
songs are long. The arrangements are thick.
mhm.
And it starts with, I mean, Inside and Out is just a wild song.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
really nothing mainstream about it. It's pretty out there.
No, no, absolutely not. And I mean, I love about one of my favorite albums is Duke. And that's kind of a
Yeah, me too.
transition record too.
Yeah,
Um, and I love Duke and I mean Abacab, I love parts of Abacab. I love Shapes. I mean, obviously Shapes for me is like and for you, we saw the tour. So it was just
yeah.
I loved Home by the Sea live was fantastic. So yeah, so we could talk music all night.
Great.
But man, this has been really fun.
And I
Um,
hope we didn't make too many people mad. We
well,
love this album, I promise.
I love this record. I love it to death. Don't get us wrong. But I'm sure there'll be people like, "Oh, come on, man, Trick of the Tail's better." Like, okay, that's fine. You can have your
And
that's
those people won't be wrong.
it's just our opinion. Yeah. And again, it's
Right.
just today. It could be like next year I could go, "Oh yeah, Trick of the Tail's better." I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I always say these two albums are like twin towers. There's a lot of those in the rock, pop, prog rock, or whatever whatever category,
Night at the Opera, Day at the Races. Yeah.
Exactly. Rocks and Toys in the Attic. Uh,
Uh-huh.
like it's like twin towers of the two awesome records in a row. Um, but um, but yeah, so thank you for joining me, Todd.
Oh, it
Uh,
was a blast. I had a
we
great
probably
time.
should wrap this up, but man, I could talk about Genesis forever, especially with someone who
Same
knows their
here.
stuff like you. I mean, it's
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
yeah, and it's really fun to talk with people who are knowledgeable about it, and you go, oh yeah,
Same.
I agree. I can't. Oh yeah, like like when
Same for
you
me.
get emotional during Afterglow, I do too. I get like a lump in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
um. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. But I always forget to say, please like and subscribe. If you like what you're seeing, please give it a like and please subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing more of this. I'm sure if Todd will do it, I'll have him back
Oh,
again.
I would love to. Yeah.
We'll talk some more. So,
Thanks.
but thanks again, everybody. Thank you, Todd, and we'll see you next time on Curless Mania. Thank you.